How do you hand over your story to another speaker when you're doing a duo presentation? Well, it's very simple. I'm going to give you 3 reasons or 3 guidelines to take into account next time that you're doing a duo presentation and you're switching speakers in your story. Number 1 is don't do it the school-like way, meaning you finish your story and then you say, now I'm going to give the stage or the word or the next person is going to talk about this. It's okay, but it feels awkward, it feels a bit amateuristic, and you feel it the same way or you wouldn't be watching this video. So don't do it like that. It's not how the professional speakers do it, but you do want to hand over your story to another person and it has to feel very smooth. So the second thing you want to do is prepare your story together with the other speaker and making sure that every speaker knows which part is mine, and preferably that part is around one single topic. So the audience, when you're talking and you're switching between speakers, also knows, speaker 1 talks about topic A, speaker 2, B, speaker 1 again C, and maybe does the wrap up. So you don't switch every couple of sentences because it will go all over the place. The audience can't follow anymore. You'll get distracted. If you're nervous, the more you switch, the more nerves and stress you have because you might forget to switch or you talk too much or you take a piece from someone else. You don't want that. So you prepare your story together. You have point A, you have point B, you have point C. We all have a section that we do and we know exactly where it begins and where it ends. Adding to that, you don't only want to know which speaker does which part, you also want to know how the parts are linked together, because a great story is only a story when every point is linked to the other point, that there is cause and effect, there's a consequence to what you're saying. And that is the glue between your story. So if you talk about A, how does A link to B? How does B link to C? That's also something you need to prepare, because that is where your switch will very professionally, very automatically will happen. To give you an example, I have this controller. Let's say you're talking about this game controller, and let's say the point A that you want to make, the first section that the first speaker is doing, is that you say to the audience what this controller is, what it does, and how it looks like, and why the design is like this. That's the first point. The controller, what it is, how it looks like. The second part that speaker 2 is going to talk about is how research, and I'm making this up as I go, so it's not true what I'm saying, I'm just making this up. The second part, which speaker 2 is going to talk about, is that the design is not just the design of this controller, but they found a correlation between the design of the controller and the performance of a gamer. That's the second part. And maybe the third part of your story is then when speaker 1 comes again, saying that because this happened, this research, now we see that PC gamers who are normally playing with keyboard and mouse are switching to controllers because they saw the correlation with better gaming. Like I said, it's made up. This is not true, but let's say those are the 3 parts in your presentation. Speaker 1 does A, speaker 2 does B, speaker 1 does part C. So you have the different parts and you have the links, because the first part talks about what the controller is and how it looks like. The consequence or the link to it or the effect is that the design is not just the design, but they found a correlation between the design and the performance of gaming. And therefore, because they saw that correlation, PC gamers are now slowly switching to controller instead of keyboard and mouse because they also want to have that performance. Those are the sections in your story, and those are the links. And what will happen in your presentation is then speaker 1 will be on stage and talking about how this controller looks and what it looks like and what it does, so people know that it's a controller. And they will wrap up their story and say, and this is what the controller is and why it looks the way it looks. And the person goes silent. The second speaker knows exactly that it's now up to him or her to do their thing. They come on stage and they say, but the design is not just a design. Because what we see is that there's a clear correlation between the design of this controller and the performance of gamers. So it goes way further than just making something nice. That's a smooth, very smooth transition. No, I'm giving the stage, I'm giving the word. No, speaker 1 wraps it up and speaker 2 knows the link between A to my section B is that the design is there for a reason and research has shown something, and you go further. And the audience is like, wow, how smooth is that? We were talking about what it is, and now immediately we go that it's not just a design, there's a design with purpose. And then the second speaker wraps up their part and says, so we saw that correlation and it really improves the gaming performance. Speaker 1 knows that's the cue, so speaker 2 goes silent without saying I'm giving the word or the stage. Speaker 1 comes on stage and says, and that's the reason that we see that not only console gamers, but also PC gamers that normally go with keyboard and mice use controllers and start using controllers more because they want that same performance, and they continue with their story. Again, the audience is like, yes, because there's a research correlation, and now this speaker comes with that PC gamers therefore also want controllers. Very smooth, not very school-like. So everybody has their section, and the links between the sections are clear for the audience and for the speakers, and everybody knows when to jump in for their part and when to wrap it up. That's what you want. So number one, no school-like, and number two, know your sections, be very clear on it, and know the links between those sections, and use those links to jump in when one speaker ends. And the third thing you want to do is, when you're standing in a meeting, it's easy, you can just sit down, but when you're in a big conference, I recommend not standing on stage, both of you. You could do it in the beginning to introduce yourself, but it's always awkward. Let's say the first part of the first speaker is, 10 minutes. The other person is standing on that stage, doing nothing, being very awkward for 10 minutes. The audience is like, what are you doing on stage? You haven't said anything for 10 minutes. You don't want that. So either, depending on the room, the speaker that is not talking sits in the front row in the audience, is backstage, or somewhere where it is not awkward. And then when their part is, you go on stage or you stand up and you do your thing. If the sections are shorter, like 2 or 3 minutes, you can stand on stage and stand next to each other because the switch is fast enough. Longer pieces, that's a bit awkward. You don't want to be doing nothing there. Do this, practice it up front, and you will have a very smooth presentation, a great story, and very clear, smooth transitions.
Are you listening? Damn.